On the 8th of January 1945 in Tupelo, Mississippi, Jesse Aaron Presley was delivered a miscarriage. But his identical twin brother Elvis Aaron Presley was born just fine. The young boy, alongside his parents Vernon and mother Gladys, who he became especially close to, regularly attended the Assembly of God Church, a place accustomed to gospel music performances, which became a huge influence on the young Elvis. Vernon, his father, often switched from one job to another, all to support his son and wife, one time being jailed for 8 months for forging a check, forcing Elvis and Gladys to move in with relatives. Elvis entered first grade in September of 1941 at East Tupelo Consolidated, where he was regarded as being average. 5 years later, on his 11th birthday, he was expecting a bicycle from his parents, but instead got a guitar from his mother. He watched and learned the basics from his uncles and the pastor of the local church. The same year in September, Elvis enters a new school called Milam for 6th grade. Even though he was regarded as being shy and reserved, he would bring his guitar every day to school and play music, which others described as hillbilly music. There he met a classmate whose brother was known as Mississippi Slim, who had a show on the Tupelo radio station called WELO. Elvis was scheduled by Slim to perform on 2 air performances. While at first being overcome by stage fright, he later succeeded in the following week. In November 1948, Elvis moves to Memphis, Tennessee, where he enrolled at the L.C. Humes High School, where he yet again was described as mediocre in music and only had a C in the subject. During this time, he would often go to the Lansky Brothers stores and gaze throughout the windows. Eventually, he would be wearing the suit from said stores. He often would visit record stores where he would listen to various African American artists, such as Arthur Crudup and Rufus Thomas, as well as other blues musicians. In June of 1953, Elvis graduated from high school and was determined to pursue a career in music. After graduation, he worked various jobs, all while pursuing his musical ambitions. He cut his first demo tape at Sun Records titled My Happiness, and That's When Your Heartaches Begin, which was noticed by Sam Phillips, the label owner. Phillips himself was on a lookout for something new, something never before seen or heard, saying, "If I could find a white man who had the Negro sound and the Negro feel, I could make $1 billion." He invited Winfield Scotty Moore, a guitarist, and Bill Black, a bassist, to perform alongside Elvis. And on a late night session on July 5th, Elvis recorded That's Alright, his first single in 1954. The song became a hit thanks to the Memphis DJ Dewey Phillips, who 3 days later played it on his Red Hot and Blue show. The song was so popular that he was getting calls all day long from people trying to find out who the singer was. At the end of July, the trio appeared at Overton Park Shell, where a nervous Elvis began shaking and wiggling his hips, combining this with his dance moves and pioneering the rubber legs dance style. In November of 1954, Elvis performed on Louisiana Hayride, after which he was engaged for a year's worth of Saturday night appearances. This is where Elvis sold his childhood guitar for $8 and purchased a brand new Martin instrument for the price of $17. Later, Presley made his first TV appearance on the KSLA TV broadcasts of Louisiana Hayride, making him a regional star from Tennessee to West Texas. In January of 1955, Elvis met Colonel Tom Parker, who was considered by many as the best promoter in the music business. Due to Elvis's unique style of singing, radio stations found it difficult to find him playtime. The country music one saying that he sounded too black, and the rhythm and blues one saying that he sounded too hillbilly. And so this style of music was named rockabilly. In August, Tom Parker became Elvis' special advisor, and on the 21st he struck a deal with RCA Victor to acquire Elvis' contract for Sun Records for $40,000. January 27, 1956, Elvis records and releases his single called Heartbreak Hotel. Meanwhile, Tom Parker managed to book him on CBS's stage show. In March, he became Elvis's manager. Later, on the 23rd, his first album was released, titled Elvis Presley, becoming a major success and becoming the first ever rock and roll album to top the Billboard charts, holding this position for 10 weeks. On April the 3rd, Elvis made his first appearance on NBC's Milton Berle show, performing on the deck of the USS Hancock in San Diego, California. 12 weeks later, Heartbreak Hotel became his first #1 pop hit. Later the same month, he began a 2-week residency at the New Frontier Hotel and Casino on the Las Vegas Strip. While staying there, he performed for the middle-aged conservative crowd, who was not so impressed with what they saw and heard. But Elvis signed a contract with Paramount Pictures, since he had an interest starring in films. He covered the song Hound Dog by Big Mama Thornton and made it his closing act. On July 1st, 1956, Elvis appeared on The Steve Allen Show on NBC. Personally, Allen hated rock and roll music and thought Elvis was absurd, so he had Elvis perform Hound Dog, standing in a white box tie and black tails. The next day, Elvis recorded Hound Dog and Don't Be Cruel, which ruled the top charts for 11 weeks. This was not surpassed for 36 years. Presley's appearance on The Steve Allen Show had caused that show to beat Ed Sullivan's show in ratings for the first time ever. This prompted Sullivan to book Elvis for free appearances for $50,000. The show aired on September 9th, 1956 and was seen by over 60 million viewers, or 82.6% of the TV audience. All these people watched Elvis sing a forthcoming single of his called Love Me Tender, prompting 1 million advance orders. This TV appearance made Elvis the national celebrity of unmatched proportion. On October 19, 1956, the second album, titled Elvis, was released and quickly became a #1 on the Billboard charts. 9 days later, he made the second appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. Later on November the 21st, he released his debut film, titled Love Me Tender, which was criticized by critics but ultimately was a box office success. On January 6, 1957, he made his third and final Ed Sullivan Show appearance. 2 days later, the Memphis Draft Board announced that Elvis would be classified 1A and would be drafted sometime next year. On March 19, 1957, a 22-year-old Elvis bought an 18-room mansion called Graceland, 9 miles south of Memphis. Right after the purchase, he recorded Loving You, the soundtrack for his second film, also his third and #1 album, its name being Jailhouse Rock. After that, he released Elvis's Christmas album, which would become the best-selling Christmas album in the US, with over 20 million sales worldwide. On March 24, 1958, Elvis was drafted into US Army as a private in Fort Chaffee, near Fort Smith, Arkansas. In Fort Hood, Texas, he underwent basic military training. In August, his mother was diagnosed with hepatitis, and on the 12th, he was granted emergency leave to visit her. 2 days later, she died of heart failure at age 46. This crushed Elvis, leaving him never the same before. After basic military training, he went to Friedberg, Germany. In November 24th, 1958, he was promoted to private first class, and on June 1st, 1959, he was promoted to specialist fourth class. While in Germany, he began using amphetamines and practicing karate. He also met Priscilla Bewley, who was 14 at the time, but he would marry her after 7.5 years of courtship. On March 2nd, 1960, he returned to the US to be honorably discharged, 3 days later within the rank of sergeant. On the 20th, he entered RCA Victor's studio in Nashville to cut tracks for a new album alongside the single Stuck on You, which upon release reached #1. 2 weeks later, he released It's Now or Never and Are You Lonesome Tonight, alongside with the fourth album titled Elvis Is Back. Later, he released G.I. Blues, the first film since returning from the military, also a same-named album, which became a #1 hit by October. On March 25, 1961, he did a charity concert at the Pearl Harbor Memorial in Hawaii. This was also his last public appearance for the next 7 years. Tom Parker pushed Elvis at a heavy filmmaking schedule, creating modestly funded musical comedies, starring in 27 films which were heavily criticized but ultimately profitable. As the time went by, the songs diminished in quality, but Elvis is regarded to have sang them well. Up to 1964, Elvis had 3 soundtrack albums ranked number 1 on the pop charts. Between 1964 to 1968, Elvis had 1 top 10 hit, that being Crying in the Chapel. In 1967, Elvis won his first Grammy Award for his 9th album, How Great Thou Art. Elvis proposed to Priscilla Bewley, and later the couple got married on May 1st, 1967, at the Aladdin Hotel in Los Angeles. On February 1st, 1968, Lisa Marie, Elvis's only child, was born. In between January of 1967 and May of 1968, Elvis released 8 singles, of which only 2 charted the top 40, none higher than the number 28. His forthcoming album, called Speedway, will rank at number 82 on the Billboard charts. This was, until this point, the most difficult period of his career. But in late June, an NBC show was recorded in Burbank, California, thanks to Tom Parker. It aired on December 3rd, 1968. At first called Elvis, but later to be renamed the 1968 Special Comeback. The show captured 42% of total audience viewing, and was Elvis's first appearance since 1961. In January of 1969, the single If I Can Dream reached number 12, which the soundtrack album rose to the top 10s. In April, the single In the Ghetto reached number 3 on the pop charts. In May, the brand new International Hotel booked Elvis to perform for 4 weeks. During his time there, he was given the nickname The King by a journalist. Parker secured a 5-year contract with the hotel for Elvis to perform each February and August for an annual salary of $1 million. The single Suspicious Minds reached number 1 on the US pop charts, making it his first and last number 1 hit in over 7 years. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM for short, filmed rehearsal and concert footage for the International during August for the documentary Elvis, That's the Way It Is. Here is where Elvis wore a white jumpsuit that became a trademark of his live act. December 7, 1970, and the King met the President, Richard Dick Nixon, where he expressed his belief that he could reach out to the hippie youth and revert them from their drug culture. He even went out to ask Nixon for a Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs badge. Nixon felt this encounter was awkward, but he believed that the King could possibly influence the youth. Later, on January 16, 1971, the U.S. Junior Chamber of Commerce named Elvis one of its annual The Most Outstanding Young Man of the Nation. In April 1972, MGM filmed Elvis for the Elvis on Tour movie, which went out to win the Golden Globe Award for Best Documentary Film that year. Later, he would earn another Grammy Award for his gospel album titled He Touched Me for Best Inspirational Performance. After that, on August 1st, 1972, Elvis would release Burning Love, his last top 10 hit in the US Hot 100 pop charts. While all this was going, he was growing more and more distant from Priscilla. This, combined with Elvis's affair with Joyce Bova, resulted in him separating with Priscilla on the 25th of February 1972. On January 14th, Aloha from Hawaii aired, becoming the first concert by a solo artist to be aired globally. It aired prime time to audiences in Japan, South Korea, Thailand, the Philippines, New Zealand, and Australia, and as well as the US military bases scattered around Southeast Asia. The next night, it was simulcast in 28 European countries. And in April, an extended version aired in the US, winning a 57% share of TV audiences. The same month, during an incident involving 4 Chilean men, Elvis became obsessed with the idea that Mike Stone was trying to kill him. This led to him having outbursts of rage and abdominal pain. To cope with this, he started using more medication. On October 9, 1973, Elvis's divorce was finalized. The same year, he had overdosed twice on barbiturates and was hospitalized for his peptide addiction. RCA was growing anxious by the day, as Elvis hadn't released anything since December of 1973. But Parker stepped in with another concert record titled Elvis Recorded Live on Stage in Memphis. It included a version of How Great Thou Art, winning him his third and final Grammy Award. In November of 1976, Elvis and Linda Thompson split up, after which he took up Ginger Alden as his new girlfriend. 2 months later, he proposed to her. By early 1977, Elvis wasn't looking or feeling like his older self. The once healthy and slim rock and roll star became overweight and was suffering from glaucoma, hypertension, liver damage, and an enlarged colon, all possibly caused and amplified by the drugs he was ingesting daily. On June 11th, he released his final single, Way Down, and on the 26th, he held his last concert in Market Square Arena in Indianapolis. On Tuesday, August 16, 1977, Elvis was discovered in an unresponsive state lying on the bathroom floor of his Graceland mansion by Ginger Alden, his fiancée. He was taken to Baptist Memorial Hospital, where he was pronounced deceased at 3:30 p.m. at the age of 42. Jimmy Carter, the then President of the United States, issued a statement crediting Elvis Presley for having permanently changed the face of American culture. Elvis's cousin Billy Mann snuck a photo of Elvis and was paid $80,000 for it by the National Enquirer, becoming their biggest selling issue ever. Ginger Alden struck a $105,000 deal to tell her story, but was paid less for breaking it. Elvis left her with no money in his will. The funeral was held at Graceland on Tuesday, August 18, 1977, with around 80,000 people lined up to pay their respects. At the end, Elvis was buried next to his mother. Between 1977 and 1981, 6 posthumous singles were released, all becoming top 10 country hits. Graceland was opened to the public in 1982, attracting 500,000 visitors annually, making it the second most visited house in the US, right after the White House. In 2006, it became a declared national landmark. As for Elvis's legacy, he is the best-selling solo artist in history, a major influence in pop music and culture, and was, is, and will be an inspiration for many others.